Okay, we're going to look at animating using After Effects. So this is part 3 of the motion graphics tutorials, and we're going to apply some of the things we learned in part 2 to do with keyframing to a more complicated example. So just as an illustration here, I have a graphic, and I've decided that over the course of my 10-second clip that the graphic is going to come together and slowly reveal itself. So you can just see as I kind of scrub the playhead here, there's a couple of things going on. We've got some positional keyframing or tweening, which we've just done using the ball, and then there's some other things like opacity, so fading up, and also with these two side circles, the small ones, some rotation. Okay, so a little tip: if you might have one of two ideas. So you could, over the 10 seconds, have things flying in to build up your graphic or logo, in which case you'll just open up your PSD and put some positional keyframes in at the end. So if I just go into these layers here and you can have a look. So you can see I've got a lot of keyframes at the end saying this is the final position. So if you open up the layered document, everything's in the place that it should be, and you can just go to the end and keyframe, so that's the final position, and it's a way of just, and then work backwards. Or if you're wanting it to start off as the logo and then explode, obviously you do it the other way, so you put all your keyframes in at the beginning and work forwards like we did with the ball. So I'm just going to show you how that works on a kind of new example. So this is the graphic that we have. You can see everything's in position and layered up and labeled, ready to import. And then in After Effects, if we go import that file, so tutorial PSD, retain layer sizes, and then click on that composition, you'll see that this is the artwork. So everything's in position as it should be, but there are no keyframes. So if I'm going to have everything kind of explode out of shot, I could just go in, and here's a tip. So shift click all your layers and then type P for position, and that gives you all your positional transform controls. And then if you click the stopwatch, everything starts from the position that it's at as imported. I'm going to go the other way, so I want it all to fly in and end up there. So just a quick start, just run down to the end, leave the playhead at 10 seconds, and then put in my first keyframe with the stopwatch. And you'll see that all these keyframes are populated here. So that's how everything's going to end up. So I can just press P while all those layers are selected again, tuck away the position stuff. Now I'm going to just start quite quickly with this main logo element. So this big circle here. So if I just, which is called main. So at first I'm going to just have that drop in. So you remember from the animation that's the first bit to drop in. So I can just go to main and go back to the transform controls. And then with the playhead at the beginning, just say okay, it's going to start, and then just hold down shift so it comes down straight. It's going to start out of shot. And then because I know that this is the final position it needs to be in, instead of, so just say it's going to come down in 2 seconds or maybe 1.5 seconds. I know that it wants to be in this position, so I can just take this final keyframe here and push it down so that it's 1.5 seconds. So because we've kind of keyframed that final position, we can then move them from the end. So that's going to come in first quite quickly. Just moving on, so I'm not going to do them all, just to give you an idea. So you'll remember that the text, the digital art future, fades up quite quickly at the end. So I can just go to the text layer, which is on top. You can scroll down into the transform controls here, and I'm going to say okay, it's going to fade up over 1 second at the end. So roll down to 9, go to opacity, click on the stopwatch for a keyframe, and then roll down to 0. So I'm just making the value for that opacity 0, and then roll the playhead up to the end, and then make it 100. So we've got this sort of quick snap at the end. So you can see how quickly it is. So starting from a hole, depending on how you want it to come together or blow apart, you just put some keyframes in and kind of work in this hands-on way. Finally then, so just this one of these little circles from the edge here, so which was left small, this one here. Now you remember from my animation it kind of flies in, but it also rotates. So there's two things we need to do there. So if we go onto the transform controls for that, we can say, okay, it's going to start from off canvas to the left. So I can just, because I've got my playhead at the beginning now, I can just drag that off, hold down shift, it will be straight. I know that it's going to finish up at that final position, so I can just go in and grab that last keyframe and decide how quickly it's going to fly in. So maybe over just about 2 seconds. And then I can just scrub the playhead to see how it works in combination with the big circle. Then go back to the beginning, rotation, stopwatch, add a keyframe. And then I can roll in, line up the playhead with the positional keyframe above, so I want it to stop rotating at the point that it stops. I can then right click rotation, add a keyframe. And then if I go back to this one, so if you want to highlight a keyframe, just click on the first keyframe again with the playhead over it. That makes it yellow. And you can just say, okay, I want it to rotate once. And then enter, and you'll see that it rotates. So in playing with this, you can see that it rotates a sort of anti-clockwise way. If you want to reverse that, with that keyframe highlighted again, just type -1. That changes the direction of rotation. So that's one full rotation of 360 degrees. If you wanted to, you could say, okay, 0, and you just want it to rotate 180 degrees, for instance. So a half turn, and that way you can see it goes slower. And equally, -180 would be in a clockwise way. So it gets a little bit complicated with the number of layers, but if you just do a stage at a time, putting in your keyframes for position, opacity and rotation, and then always kind of you can just by hand scroll through and see how the elements come together for timing. And then once you've got a rough draft of that, you can then do a RAM preview, so using this preview button. And if it's all running too slowly, then go in and tweak the keyframes. So if you want things to move quicker, just push keyframes closer together and just fine tune the kind of speed. Once you're happy with that, or all throughout your working, just save as, give your project a name, and keep saving. And then in a later tutorial, we'll show you how to export so that you have an HD movie.